We were not in touch for a while. A message. Haven't spoken to you in a while. Just checking in to make sure you are okay.
That is how long it took on a warm Sunday night in Toronto to end the longest winning streak of Alex Eala's career. 73 minutes for a set she had never lost like this before. Not in a WTA main draw. Not in front of a crowd this loud. Not with a number 20 next to her name on the scoreboard for the first time in her life. Belinda Bencic served for the match at 5-0 in the second set. The Filipina on the other side of the net, the one who 7 days earlier had lifted a trophy in Washington and made her country's tennis history in a single afternoon, was standing at love, 40 on a bagel that almost nobody in the stadium had seen coming. It ended cleanly, 4-6, 0-6. Handshake at the net, polite applause, and then a silence that would last about 48 hours before it became the actual story. Because inside those 48 hours, something was happening that the scoreboard could not show. Something that would reframe every one of those 73 minutes in a way the WTA and the fans watching that bagel would only understand later. To understand why that silence matters, you have to understand what the 7 matches before it meant. On August 3rd, 2026, Eala defeated the world number 3, Jessica Pegula, 4-6, 6-4, 6-0 in the final of the Mubadala City DC Open, becoming the first player from the Philippines to win a WTA Tour singles title in the tour's 53-year history. The ranking update that followed moved her from world number 28 to a career-high number 20, making her the first Filipina ever inside the WTA top 20. 2 days later, she was back on court in Toronto, extending that Washington run with wins over Alicia Parks and Katie McNally, both three-setters, both grinds. 7 consecutive wins across 2 tournaments in 9 days. Then Bencic. Then the silence. The tension in this story is not Eala versus Bencic. Bencic was, on the night, the better player on a court where she has more career wins than at any other WTA 1000 site, 18 in total at the National Bank Open. She also arrived with a statistical quirk almost nobody outside deep tennis circles was tracking: 10 consecutive wins over left-handed opponents dating back to 2024. Eala, of course, is a lefty. Bencic herself struggled to explain it. In her post-match press conference, quoted directly by the WTA, she said, "I feel like it can't be coincidental. I don't think it's weird for me as well because I really hate playing lefties and it's just not comfortable. Like the entire match you are uncomfortable, but maybe I feel like because I have good timing, I'm kind of able to switch. I think that's the only thing I can think of because I really don't like playing them." She said that after beating the 8th highest ranked left-hander in the world in 73 minutes without dropping a game in the second set. The real tension in this story is not between 2 players. It is between a 21-year-old body and a calendar that does not care what your ranking says. Calendar that puts a WTA 500 final on a Sunday and a WTA 1000 first serve 48 hours later on the other side of a continent and expects the same person to show up both times with the same shoulder. The scoreline is where the analysis begins: 4-6, 0-6 in 73 minutes. According to the WTA's own match report and ESPN coverage, it was the first straight sets loss Eala had suffered since her defeat to Elise Mertens at Bad Homburg earlier in the summer. The first set was competitive in structure. Bencic broke in the 9th game to close it out 6-4, but the internal numbers already showed something off. Eala's first serve win rate in that opening set was 53%. Bencic's was 67. That gap of 14 percentage points on first strike points is not small. On grass or clay, it can be papered over with movement. On a hard court against a Tokyo Olympic gold medalist, it is a hole you cannot climb out of. And in her very first service game of the match, Eala committed 2 early double faults, opening the door for a break that set the tone for everything that followed. Double fault is not just a misswing. It is a shoulder-loaded action delivered under stress. When the first one becomes the second one inside a single game, the pattern is worth noticing. The second set is where the collapse became total. 6-0. Bencic broke Eala in the opening game, held, broke again, held, and served out the bagel in what the WTA measured as 1 hour and 13 minutes of total match time. Across those 6 games, she won 8 return points on Eala's first serve alone. A player at number 20 in the world does not concede a bagel in a WTA 4th round without something else in the equation. It could have been Bensik's level on her best surface in her happiest hunting ground. It could have been fatigue from 4 3-set matches in 9 days at the highest tour level. It could have been, as would emerge in the days that followed, something quieter, a shoulder that had already begun to speak, even if it had not yet been named out loud, because the load leading into that match was not ordinary. Look at what her body had absorbed in the 10 days before Toronto. 3-set final in Washington against the world number 3. 3-set opening match in Toronto against Alicia Parks. 3-set third-round grind against Katie McNally in which she received on-court medical attention for an ankle scare confirmed by ESPN. In a match she still somehow won 6-3, 5-7. 6-4. 4 3-set matches inside a 9-day window. Roughly 10 hours of top-level tennis. Hundreds of first serves. Hundreds of second serves. Thousands of shoulder rotations under match pressure. The Washington title celebration on Monday morning. The flight north. The first round bye, and then straight into 2 more 3-setters. By the time Bensik stepped on court, the body that had made history in Washington had not been given 72 consecutive hours of rest since before the Washington main draw began. That is, the part of the story the broadcast could not show you. And then came the silence. 48 hours of it. Maybe 72, depending on which time zone you measure from. The Bensik match ended late Sunday night Eastern Time, early Monday morning in the Philippines. And for the next 2.5 days, there was nothing. No post-match blast on her verified Instagram beyond the standard acknowledgement. No press availability that added detail. And then, on the WTA's official website, a notice. Alexandra Eala had withdrawn from the Cincinnati Open and from the Abierto GNP Seguros in Monterrey, Mexico, citing a shoulder injury. Mexican player Renata Zarazua would take her spot. In the Cincinnati main draw, according to the WTA release and corroborated by Inquirer Sports, GMA Sports, and the Philippine Star, suddenly the bagel from Sunday night looked different. Not because anyone had confirmed that the shoulder affected the Bensik match. Nobody in her camp has said that on the record, and this script is not going to say it either. But because a shoulder serious enough to cost her a WTA 1000 and a WTA 500 back-to-back does not, in most cases, arrive fully formed on a Tuesday morning. Bodies whisper before they shout. The whisper, it seems, had already begun. We just could not hear it over 73 minutes of live coverage. That is why the framing around this story matters, and why it also has to be handled with care. Nothing in the public record suggests Eala or her team concealed anything from tournament officials or from the tour. What is true is that the shoulder was not publicly known during the Bensik match itself. It became public only after. The distinction sounds small. It is actually the whole story. This is not a case of a player hiding a diagnosis. This is a case of a body management decision made in the quiet 48 hours between one tournament and the next, exactly the way a career is supposed to be managed when the person living inside it is 21 years old and just became the first athlete from her country to do something no one from her country had ever done. The clearest authority voice available on this event is the WTA itself, which handled the announcement through its official tour communications and confirmed both withdrawals in a single release. That release framed the shoulder as the reason and did not attach a specific timetable to her return, a detail worth noting, because a career management withdrawal typically is not accompanied by a hard return date. When Chris Evert and Pam Shriver discussed Eala's rise on broadcast earlier in the summer during the Washington and Wimbledon coverage windows, they emphasized the same theme that Eala's own on-record quote reinforced. This player is building, not peaking. Her own words from the Reuters interview after the Washington final are the ones the story keeps pulling back to. I feel so much love, she said. My first chance at a title, knowing it won't be the last, and already having achieved this milestone for my career. Knowing it won't be the last. That is not the sentence of a player who thinks Toronto and Cincinnati are the referendum on her career. That is the sentence of a player who is already thinking 2, 3, 5 seasons ahead, and whose team, when the shoulder started to speak, appears to have listened. The stakes here reach well beyond one bagel set. Eala is now the first Filipina inside the WTA top 20 in a sport that had been run for more than 5 decades without a single Filipino singles champion until 9 days earlier. The Cincinnati Open she is skipping is the final WTA 1000 event before the US Open. It is the tournament where world number 1 Aryna Sabalenka and world number 2 Coco Gauff will sharpen their form, where 45-year-old Venus Williams will play on a wild card, where the North American hardcourt story of the summer usually gets its second-to-last chapter. Eala will not be there. She will also not be in Monterrey. According to Filipino sports outlets and the WTA release, her attention now turns to recovery ahead of the US Open, which begins in late August 2026. Whether she plays it is, as of the reporting available at the time of this script, an open question. Nobody in her camp has committed to it publicly. Nobody has ruled it out. The audience does not get a clean answer here, and this script is not going to invent one. What the wider WTA is watching, whether it has said so publicly or not, is the same pattern that has surfaced with several young players in recent seasons. The compression of the summer hardcourt swing, the back-to-back-to-back WTA 1000 obligations, the shoulder and back and wrist injuries that tend to arrive on the far side of a breakthrough result rather than before it. Emma Raducanu after her 2021 US Open. Bianca Andreescu after her 2019 US Open. The pattern is not identical for Eala. Every body is its own case, but the general shape is familiar. And the reason it is familiar is that the schedule is unforgiving. The story of the withdrawal, then, is also the story of a tour that keeps finding out one young champion at a time what its own calendar costs. The vulnerability at the center of this week is not the Bensic bagel. It is the 48 hours after it. In those hours, a 21-year-old who had just become the most decorated tennis player in her country's history had to make a decision that professional athletes describe as one of the hardest they ever learned to make. Whether to keep going on the momentum of a career best into a WTA 1000 where a deep run would have pushed her ranking even higher, or to stop. To pull out. To let the ranking sit where it is, protect the shoulder, and take the loss of 2 tournaments in exchange for the possibility of a healthier US Open. She chose to stop. The scoreline from Sunday told one story. The choice from Tuesday told a different one. Both are true. Only one of them is the actual measure of where this career is going. Which brings us back to 73 minutes. 73 minutes to end a streak. 73 minutes does not end a season. The number 20 next to her name does not move because you skip a tournament. It moves because you built the floor high enough to be able to skip one. Filipino tennis fans across social platforms in the hours after the withdrawal news broke kept returning to the same 3-word phrase in comment sections under GMA Sports and Inquirer posts. Speedy recovery, Alex. Not come back stronger. Not we forgive the loss. Just get well. It is the reaction of a fandom that has finally learned that a champion who belongs to them is also a body that belongs to itself. Alex Eala told us on the microphone in Washington 9 days ago that this first title would not be the last. She said it before the bagel, before the withdrawal, before the silence. She said it because she already knew what the rest of us are only now catching up to. The streak paused. The work did not. The Cincinnati Open will play without her. Monterrey will play without her. The US Open draw will be released, and the question of whether her name is in it will be answered when it is answered, and not a moment before. Until then, the ranking sits at 20. The trophy from Washington sits wherever. She keeps it now. The shoulder does whatever a shoulder does when it is finally allowed to rest. And somewhere between the 73-minute loss on a Sunday night and the tournament she will eventually walk back onto, the season she is actually playing, the long one, the real one, the one nobody can measure in a single scoreline, keeps going. Quietly, deliberately, without needing to be watched to be real. Tennis diaries where the ones who saw the streak begin stay until the body is ready again.